Hey everybody, Lawler here, your insider for all things Rocket League related. We've got a lot to recap in regards to the grid for Week 8 in both North America and Europe, and EU Regional 3 just wrapped up, so we'll be breaking that down as well. But before we get into that, as always, if you guys enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up, as well as making sure to hit subscribe and turning on notifications. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, drop those down below, as it does help out the YouTube algorithm greatly. Without further ado, let's get straight into the recap. Before we get into the specifics of the regionals and the grid, the schedule, as a reiteration, was messed up this week. Because of free-to-play, they had to move things around, and with regionals being 4 days rather than over the course of 2 weekends, they had to adjust the schedule. So European grid was on Tuesday, while North American grid was on Thursday. So next week, as a heads up, it is going to be on Tuesday and Wednesday with NA and EU. So keep that in mind, as the schedule is a little bit messy for these weeks going through. Starting off with European grid, though, going in chronological order, was the grid for Week 8 because the regionals on the weekend. And in Group A and B is going to be Guild, Giants, Endpoint, and Vitality. Probably the biggest surprise was TopLocs not making it through, but as a reminder, TopLocs also was not playing with their star in Archie. Archie was being subbed out, and they did use their sub. So despite that, they did have a pretty good fight making it through. But ultimately, they do end up dropping to Endpoint, who started off pretty rough against a Vitality team that looked pretty hot. On the other side, in Group C and D, BDS makes it through. Monkeys also performing pretty well. Their third week in a row making top 8, so congrats to them. The big thing to notice there is in their very first match, forfeiting is Chalked. Chalked has not been able to field a full team with Magnus going to a new roster. So Chalked was actually getting removed from the grid, and in Week 9, Fadeaway will be taking their spot. If you guys haven't seen that in a previous video, Fadeaway did end up playing in a best of 5 against Magnifico and winning 3-0, so they got the last spot because Psyonix ultimately does not want to just give a free win to everybody. So quick response to them. Hopefully that gives Fadeaway a better chance when it comes to the winter split. Monkeys continue to have Oxygen's number as they qualify over there, but ultimately Oxygen does drop to the lowers and win against Singularity, while Team Liquid beats Dignitas and moves on through. So our top 8 is going to be Guild, Giants, Endpoint, Vitality, BDS, Monkeys, Oxygen, and Team Liquid. Jumping into the playoffs, a really exciting match. Even though Monkeys does have the win coming in from uppers and they get a guaranteed game 1, they do end up dropping Liquid 4-3. Honestly, the game was pretty sloppy between both rosters. There wasn't a whole lot to be excited about, and you kind of just felt whoever was going to get to play against Liquid in the semifinals was going to go on to win. Guild Esports puts up a pretty good fight against Endpoint. That, again, I think Endpoint only qualified in this regard because TopLocs wasn't there with their full roster. Giants looks stellar as always and end up beating Oxygen. And then BDS versus Vitality. This is usually a coin toss, but in this circumstance, BDS does 3-0, technically 4-0 with the 1-game advantage as they move on to the semifinals. Jumping back to the top semifinal, Liquid versus Guild. Talked about this just a second ago about how it really felt like whoever was playing Liquid was going to get kind of a freebie. And Guild started a little bit slow here and there, but ultimately did end up getting the win. So 4-2 for Guild. On the other side, BDS looked unstoppable. And this tends to happen for a lot of teams in the guild, where when they get into the quarterfinals, if they look really solid in that first one, it doesn't look like anything is going to slow them down. So BDS had a really good warm-up match against Vitality and goes 12-0 in the playoffs. They don't drop a single match in the grand finals. They also look like they completely outclassed Guild. Not a whole lot to talk about this one, even though Guild tried to put up a pretty decent fight. We then go over to North American grid, and this was on Thursday. And in Group A and B, it was Space Station version 1 coming in through the uppers. You then have Energy and G2 going in through the lowers. I did cover, obviously, version 1 on broadcast, and they'd have 2 exciting Game 5s, one against Rogue, where they were able to hold on to a lead, and then one against Energy, which was a huge upset, and that's what we needed from V1. V1 has been, for a very long time, in my opinion, a very solid roster, but just quite haven't been able to win out, even though they get that low seed and have to get a very big upset win. And to do it against Energy, the team that's looking like the best in North America right now, I think is a pretty big deal. So congrats to version 1. Hopefully they continue that trend. But Energy and G2, obviously, in the lowers, they're going to bounce back. I have no problems with them there. Over to Group C and D, you've got Envy, Kansas City Pioneers, Omelette, and Peeps. Omelette probably being the big surprise. They've actually had some pretty solid performances the last couple of weeks. I would still give Pittsburgh Knights the nod, but they did not do well. Kansas City Pioneers, though, continuing to show that they are a top 6 team in North America for sure. Because of the weirdness that comes in the upper bracket, you do have some teams that get an advantage. First one up, Space Station versus Omelette. Space Station obviously leagues ahead of Omelette. They win as they're trying to bounce back and find their form again after a couple rough weeks. Energy versus Envy playing for the umpteenth time. This is, I can't even tell you. I think it's like 6 or 7 times that these two teams have played each other. Energy gets the lead this time. It doesn't look like anybody was going to slow them down. Envy continues to have a really solid defense, and I really enjoy watching them for that factor. But Energy with Squishy have really found their form and look like a lethal team. Version 1 versus Peeps. Version 1 does get the 1-game advantage. Ultimately, Peeps does end up winning in 7. And the best part about this is this was actually a back-and-forth match. There's numerous times where Peeps looked really good. Other times when Version 1 looks really good. Peeps end up winning on a very last second. I think it was like 21 seconds into OT. And Gyro decides to double commit on a play and goes for a bump on the last player and gets rewarded for it. So again, Peeps numerous times in this series were just taking that risk to give them the nod in the game, and you commend them for it. It is very risky to go for plays like that, but if you're being rewarded for it and you trust your teammates, it opens up opportunities. So congrats to Peeps, looking solid as well. And then Kansas City Pioneers, a big upset over G2 where they win 4-2. Do have a 1-game advantage in the uppers, so technically it is a 3-2 victory, ultimately winning a best of 5. But again, Kansas City Pioneers trending in the right direction. They then move on immediately after to beat against the Peeps in a best of 7, going the distance. Kansas City Pioneers I have deemed as this controlled chaos. This is the playstyle that they want to recreate, and they continue to do so. Kansas City Pioneers, a team as Beast Mode gets more and more confident, is going to enable Rapid to do more and more unique stuff, and it shows here. Up at the top, I kind of briefly went over this, but Energy looked unbeatable. They end up 4-0ing Space Station and then move on to Kansas City Pioneers. And despite Kansas City Pioneers looking good, get smacked. Energy is easily the best team in North America right now. As this series progressed, it did start relatively close, but as Energy gets into the series, they just start to run away with it. So Energy, a team that shows not only can they win in regionals, but they can also win in the grid. So congrats to them, considering they were up against G2 in the last 2 weeks before that, and they took second place in both of those. And last but not least, we have the regionals for Regional 3 of Europe. We have 32 teams trying to qualify. There's a whole bunch of them if we scroll through the list, but the ones that we want to pay attention to is the top 16. In Group A, we've got 8 teams that qualify through. Top Blokes, BDS, Endpoint, Galaxy Racer. If you guys don't know Galaxy Racer, I haven't seen that video that I put out recently. The Monkeys have recently been picked up by the team Galaxy Racer, which is a team based in Dubai. You've got Solary, Barrage, making it again, Guild, and then Nameseekers. If you guys don't know Nameseekers, they are the new addition with Taz coming over with Cash and Blurry. So big performance by them. No real surprises in teams from that group. In Group B then was kind of the group of death. You had teams like Oxygen, Vitality, Barcelona, Liquid, Dignitas, Libertas, Fadeaway, Triple Trouble, Singularity, Giants. A bunch of teams in this group that could have went either way. The biggest surprise was probably for me, Giants and Triple Trouble not qualifying. You thought Triple Trouble probably would have done it, but because Dignitas is making it in, I think that's a big deal. The other big shock is Giants. If you guys haven't seen my post about Tox getting a 72-hour ban, make sure you go check out that video. I'll link it somewhere up here probably. The Giants team definitely took a hit. No shots at Wolf by any means, but go check out that video if you want full details on that. We then look at Stage 2, and this is the top 16 teams battling it out, trying to find our top 8. This one was pretty competitive and actually a really exciting day. This one went down on Saturday. The teams that come out on top immediately were Top Blokes and Team BDS. Top Blokes definitely solidifying themselves as a possible top 3 team in the region. Continuously having the results and winning without dropping matches, I think, is a really big deal. BDS close behind them, having to face both a hot-looking Guild as well as Vitality, while Top Blokes goes through probably their only big challenge, which was Barcelona. Vitality, again, drops to BDS. Trading wins as always, but have no troubles against any of the other teams. And then from there, it kind of trickles in. Down to the wire, though, was Endpoint, Oxygen, Dignitas, Guild, Fadeaway, and Solary. Team Liquid does drop out early, dropping to Barcelona, Oxygen, and Endpoint, but does beat Solary, so might have to do some adjustments in the power rankings there. Fadeaway was actually surprising that they didn't end up closing out. Same with Solary. Both Dignitas trending in the right direction. Hopefully they can continue that. A much more defensive play style from them than what we've seen in the past, where Violent Panda tries to be that dictator in the midfield so he can control the pace and pass it and move it upfield, has been taking more of a defensive approach, and I'm not sure if that's due to the tendonitis that he's still struggling with or if it's a conscious effort. It seems to be a more controlled ideal that they're trying to put into place with the help of Verge. So it'll be interesting to see how Dignitas confirms, but because they aren't really meshing as well on offense, it does make Yukio a little bit more involved up on that front and has been working out pretty well. Guild is still an anomaly to me. They have times where they look like the best team in Europe or can beat the best teams, and at other times they look like the worst team. So Guild, to me, is one that I think is striving for consistency. I know Gibbs, while watching the matches today for the playoffs, was talking about the same thing about how, like, after this many weeks, you'd figure they know what's going on with them internally, but it's been kind of back and forth for them. So Guild, kind of your wild card team. Either they're going to play absolutely dominant or they're going to poop the bed. So we got our 8 teams jumping into the playoffs. As you look at the bracket, we've got Toplux versus Endpoint, Galaxy Racer versus Barcelona, Team BDS versus Dignitas, and Vitality versus Guild. I slept in for the first match because I assumed Vitality was going to smack Guild. Was right, easy 3-0. They put up a little bit of a fight early, but after that, it was just Alpha doing what he does best. BDS versus Dignitas was a really close fight, went all the way to 5. Actually, a really exciting series. Makes you kind of wish that the quarterfinals were also a best of 7. But the difficulties, it does make for a very long day with 7 series. So BDS and Dignitas, really good fight. Probably one of the better matches in the quarterfinals. Barcelona had their way with Galaxy Racer. A couple of mistakes on defense just weren't really as clean as normal. That extra day break, I think, really hurt them because they kind of killed their momentum. But for Galaxy Racer, previously Monkeys, they have now gotten in the grid top 8 3 weeks in a row, as well as a top 8 in regionals. That's a big deal. So Galaxy Racer trending in the right direction. Totally understandable why they got picked up. But as we go to the last game, Endpoint versus Toplux. Why Toplux hasn't been picked up yet, I honestly don't know. Orgs, please go sign them. But Endpoint had a hot hand today, looking really, really solid. Shoutouts to Metzinaris, playing out of his freaking mind. Relating Waves defense was really clutch. And even on the other side of that, even though Virtuoso wasn't the most threatening when it came to shots, it did lead to a lot of opportunities for his teammates. As for Toplux, they just had a really hard time of putting shots away. The opportunities were there. Archie was still playing with great shots, even though he didn't play in the grid because he was being subbed. But again, Toplux still a team that making top 8. Got to be commendable for that. As we move into the semifinals, Vitality versus BDS. They traded another win. Vitality looked absolutely unbeatable in this series. They just had their way with BDS. And BDS put up a good fight. It was a closer series than what 4-1 shows. But Vitality looked like they were not going to lose anytime soon. Similar fact for Endpoint versus Barcelona. Barcelona put up a pretty good fight, but Endpoint eventually got the ball rolling and things just seemed to be clicking. We then make our way into the grand finals where it is Vitality versus Endpoint, and a very much so back and forth series. It did not look one-sided by any means. It just ultimately came down to Endpoint missing their mark. A lot of crossbars. Some exciting moments. Game 2 is probably the big high-flying one where you saw Metzinaris really step up and show like, hey, I'm adding new elements to my games. I'm going for flip resets. I'm trying to do some aerial stuff as well as mix it up. And he looked really, really good. But when he got into games 3, 4, and moving forward, it really seemed to die down, which is unfortunate because I think Endpoint put up a really good fight today, but ultimately Vitality is just the better team. And that sucks to say because Endpoint, I think, has a really good foundation. And we haven't really seen this Endpoint since Metzinaris first joined the squad. We got a taste of them in the offseason very early on. And we're like, dang, this team could be really solid. Like, where's Endpoint? And then we didn't get to see them at all during the offseason. And they came in and had some decent performances early on in RLCS 10 or RLCS X. But then they kind of falled off for the past couple of weeks. So glad to see them bouncing back. Making it to any grand final, especially when it comes to regionals, is a really big deal. So to be 2 out of 32, pretty dang good. That is going to wrap it for me this week, you guys. Greatly appreciate the love and support that you've been showing lately. And if you have any additional questions, comments, concerns, drop those down below, and I'll do my best to get to them at a timely fashion. But that is going to wrap it up for me. We've got Sunday night football for us Americans going on in just a bit here, so I'm going to go watch the game. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace.